me looking back and remembering all the times where I followed that feeling, like this feels right. This is right. There's something very alive in my physical body. And the times that I followed that and then being able to track all the beautiful things that emerged and were catalyzed in my life and be like, that was me following my intuition.
We are learning to trust the ever-evolving rhythms of nature.
We are committed to embracing our shadow within community
and reclaiming our sovereignty.
We do this together.
That is the way.
Right, so welcome to the Elemental Movement Podcast. My name is Elden, your host here today, and I'm joined with my old friend and just wonderful human being, Bryan Osuna. And Bryan, I would love to offer you the space to introduce yourself and who and what you are in this moment, however you feel called to do so.
Just enjoying this moment and feeling everything that's happened to bring us to this moment, all of the weaving and the happenings. So I'm Bryan Osuna. My main commitment and devotion in life right now is being a father to two young boys. I'm also a coach, a men's work facilitator, a transformational sound therapist, and an artist.
Beautiful. And an inventor, yeah?
And an inventor.
Like
I lump that into the art.
Okay, so that's actually a great place to just go for a sec.
Sure.
Can you bring that to life for me? Like the art and inventor and the intersection of those for you?
Sure. Right before we press record, we were talking about what's alive for us. And I had illuminated that I am stepping back into the fitness realm, personal training, fitness coaching. And I'm actually quite excited about that. I had taken a break from it. And I had been in the personal training and fitness space for 11 years. And I had really found that artistry emerges through me in terms of physical inventions. So creating tools that actually help people move better or create balance in their body. The fun part is really getting to take something from concept, creating it, and then actually witnessing people benefiting from, using the tool and actually being nourished or really getting benefit from that. And so it's been an interesting journey, and I'm really excited to, we talked for a moment about exploring different identities and kind of opening up dark rooms and shining the light in. And so what I'm getting at is I'm really excited to bring that artistry back to life and kind of let it cross-pollinate with my gifts right now, with the sound gifts. I can really see some potential there. So the artistry has really just been letting my intuition guide me in terms of what just feels like is coming through me to help the people that are right in front of me. Yeah.
Love that. So I would love to follow that thread. And first is, how have you, or has the creativity and artistry always been a part of your existence? And either way, how have you opened up and nourished that over the years and over time?
There's always been a very alive artistic part of me. And the key for me has been being aware of when the parts of me who are really wanting to prove themselves or just fix something start trying to take the wheel too strongly.
Mm-hmm.
Because those parts of me have played a beautiful role in providing me with a drive and a certain energy, even some warrior energy. But when they take over the process of creating art, then it kind of no longer turns into art, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so the key for me, especially in inventing fitness products, is to really make sure that I'm being very aware of all the parts that are trying to contribute and that are at play, so that I can drop into moments of pure flow and intuition to let that energy of artistry come through, right? Of
Mm-hmm.
the artist. And not to discard the parts of me that are really just wanting to help people and wanting to fix things and to make this thing something at all costs, right? But to just be aware, like, I'm in the energy of wanting to fix something right now, and I'm gonna put that to the side and drop into a space of just creation for a while. And so the key has been to like really allow to just create a container, time and space for that energy to be the main thing that's emerging so that it can really be art.
Mm. So as you were speaking, the word intuition has come up a couple times.
Mhm.
And I was realizing as I was listening to you that that's actually been a common thread in our conversations over the course of the last, like, what, 7 years, 6 years? And I'm really curious because it feels like there's, as I listen to you, part of what I'm hearing is a deep relationship with the self, an intuitive understanding of how to work with that self. And I'm curious how that has developed for you and how what that process has been like over time and leading up to present.
Well, to talk about the intuition piece, my intuition has always been strong, but I have not always been aware that it's intuition that's guiding me. And so,
Okay, hold on. Bring that to life for me.
yeah,
So what is a situation in your life where that has come up? Like,
exactly. Yeah. So, a big part of honing and creating that deep connection to the incoming stream of intuition has been really reflecting, looking back in my life and reflecting and connecting dots, following threads, right? Following timelines. To go back to the invention thing, I have been able to track how me following a strong intuitive pull, which I didn't even know at the time was really intuitive pull, or I didn't have the language to say this is my intuition guiding me to to really go forward with my first invention. That was such a massively pivotal and catalytic step and moment for me to like really go for that, that changed my entire life. But had I not really reflected and looked back to connect all the dots and see, like, because I made this commitment to follow something that felt right and go forward with this thing, if I hadn't like really reflected and be like, whoa, this happened because I did this, and then this happened because I did this, and now like every single day now something new and beautiful and amazing happens in my life that is still a result and byproduct of me following my intuition 8 years ago to go forward with that first invention, right? And so that reflection, that taking the time to really reflect has been a key piece for me to recognize and understand what intuition has been and when I followed it, so that I can recognize it more and more today in real time. And so the intuition piece, now that I'm very aware of it, the way that I explain it is, I don't know if you've ever done like trivia or anything similar, but there's a
mhm.
moment when the question gets asked and you know the answer, right? There's a feeling to that. Oh, I know that answer, right? Well, intuition to me provides that same feeling. I know the answer, but there's no real logical understanding as to why I know the answer. It's just the
Mhm.
feeling like this is right. I
Mhm.
know this is right. I'm going to follow this thing.
Mhm.
And so, me looking back and remembering all the times where I followed that feeling, like this feels right. This is right. There's something very alive in my physical body. And the times that I followed that and then being able to track all the beautiful things that emerged and were catalyzed in my life and be like, that was me following my intuition. I know now, I now know why, the intuitive hit was so strong. And many times the most obvious or impactful things that came up from me following my intuition don't happen for many years, right? And like I said, things are still showing up in my life. I'm like, whoa, like this is happening because I followed my intuition 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years ago right now. And it
Mhm.
wouldn't have been so if I didn't.
Mhm.
Right.
Mhm. Mhm. So I'm curious. So when I feel into what you're saying, so my own biased opinion is that we all have strong intuitions that we are either in touch with or not in touch with, and usually it's not either or, it's varying degrees.
Yeah.
Um, and my own experience is that one of the biggest blocks to being able to follow my intuition that I have is internal programming of what should or shouldn't happen, or what I have to do or shouldn't do, etc. And I'm curious how that has shown up in your own journey, if it has shown up, and how you've navigated that over time.
Sometimes it does feel like there's conflict between the intuitive pull and something I've committed to or devoted to in my life. And so, every moment is a new opportunity to navigate that. But, there's a process that I often follow where I attune to what I'm feeling called to in life, right? I feel into what's most important, what I'm feeling called to commit to devote to create, to put out into the world. And with where I'm at in my life, very often I make a commitment to stick to something for a certain period. I take aligned action. So the key for me to be able to like really stay the course is that first attuning, right? Really checking in and connecting. And sometimes not long after I've attuned and then taken aligned action and made my commitments and devotions, like something comes in that feels like, whoa, that feels like really alive. And like maybe I should go this way instead, or it's conflicting with my commitments and devotions. And lately, of course, like really checking in at what feels alive in each moment. But that practice of attuning before I make my commitments and devotion allows me to stay course even when new things come in.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not going to say that there's not times where I'm like, something shows up and like, I got to make this change. I need to adapt. I need to come back to the attunement board, right? The drawing board. With having so many commitments in my life, my children, my wife, my family, my community, and noticing how many times I just have been fixated or stuck in states of perpetual and constant distraction. Sometimes the warrior way for me is just, I'm going to get to that sign, that post, that tree up there, and I'm going to check back in. I'm going to attune to see what the aligned action is. So sometimes even if I'm getting intuitive hits in my path to that tree, I just stay the course. I stay the course. And I've found that there is a healthy balance between practicing that warrior commitment and getting to the tree, getting to the next signpost, and listening to the flowy intuition. And so kind of balancing both. But at this point in my life, sometimes bringing in that warrior and just be like, I'm getting to that tree, and I know that is aligned action for me, is something that I've been sticking to more and more.
So there's a word that keeps on coming up in my mind as I'm listening to you, which is resolute. It's like you've created a commitment and you're resolutely going to that place
Yeah.
with a finite destination and a finite, like, here's where I'm going.
Yeah.
And then when you get there, you're taking the time to pause and to then, like, so it's like laser focus. And then we go back to the diffuse focus. Like, is this still where I need to be going? And if it's not, where do I need to go from here?
Exactly.
Can you contextualize that in a way? It's like, so you mentioned the first thing that you mentioned in your identity when you're introducing yourself is that you're a father.
Yeah.
And I'm curious how this process has shown up in your journey as dad, as father.
One thing that I would say it's very similar has been for me really exploring. I'm going to use the word non-negotiables, or the term non-negotiables in terms of parenting, right? And that's synonymous to me saying I'm going to get to this tree, right? Like
Mhm.
I'm going to just keep my eyes on this tree. I'm going to get there. In a similar vein with parenting, one of the most important things for me has been like really committing to my non-negotiables with how I want to show up as a parent, right?
Mm,
And being able to check in like whenever I need to and really be very clear on what those are.
mm. What are they for you? Are you open to sharing?
Sure. For me, a big one is safety. So there's a check-in process. Number one, is my family safe, right? Keeping my family safe is my first wave of check-in. Cool. Number two, am I showing up from a regulated and heart-centered place, right? I'm human. There's going to be times where I catch myself being dysregulated and not heart-centered. But the moment I notice it, my non-negotiable, like come back to regulation and heart-centered. Another one is always facilitating resolution. Again, I'm going to be human. I'm always going to be human. Things are going to get messy. Yeah, a non-negotiable for me is always facilitating resolution whenever I feel like I was out of integrity.
Mm,
So those are some of my top ones that I check
mhm,
in with daily, right? And
mhm,
I've realized I've connected with myself enough to know that when I am regulated, when I know that my family is safe, I will by default come back to my heart.
mm.
It's something I've practiced and cultivated, right?
So in that practice, what are some of like, how do you know when you're either not in that state or you're moving towards like the dysregulated, like things aren't good, not attached to my heart? Like, how does that show up for you personally?
There's a almost an ineffable just sense or awareness that I now have, of when I'm reacting versus responding. There's a frequency that I can feel. When I'm grounded, there's a very clear somatic signature and frequency that I can just feel in my body. And when I'm reactive, when I'm dysregulated, there's a chaotic, high pitched frequency that I can just feel and sense, right? I don't
Hmm.
know if it's emanating out of me or that I'm just connected to.
Hmm.
And I can see it. I can almost see it in the air and see how it's impacting those around me, right? Those mirror neurons, those really fine-tuned social parts of us that can tell the slightest change in other people.
Mm.
But really it's just a felt sense.
Okay,
I can
I
feel.
gotta interject. I gotta interject because you brought something in. I'm like, this is what. So,
Sure.
how do your kids respond when you're in that pitched, like dysregulated frequency? What do you notice in them?
Very often with my son, my older son Liam, he, instead of him just having like a general toddler meltdown, which is going to happen even if I'm regulated, he will be afraid of me. There's a difference there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And so he feels unsafe when I'm dysregulated and I am in a chaotic energy.
Hmm.
And that is a threat to him. And he
Hmm.
feels that. And so he will very clearly react or articulate that. I'm scared. I want to be away from you. He'll say it, or he'll run away, or he'll physically fight me off.
Mm-hmm.
Rightfully so.
Mm-hmm.
Because when I'm in that place, I don't always act from a place of integrity.
Mm-hmm.
And that can be scary.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned mirror neurons, and there's like when you said it, I just like, I have my daughter and my own experience with her that mirrors what you just shared, and it feels so important to me to acknowledge like that the co-modulation and interaction between my nervous system and those that I share like proximity with, especially like if that proximity is like living in the same home, and the ways that we are attuned to one another, and like the waves of impact that come, both like perceived positive and negative, but just like all this feedback that we're getting. So what I would love to go into, if you're open to it, Bryan, is like, so this is just this experience of like you're out of regulation, you're out of integrity, and like this desire to keep and your non-negotiable of keeping your family safe, right? Because now your energy is not safe to your family. What do you do with that?
Yeah. Well, when I notice that I'm dysregulated, I really make sure that I stay tuned in to my first non-negotiable. Keep my family safe. Because I have developed the skill, for the most part, I can be dysregulated to an extent and still keep my family safe. I have moments every once in a while where it all falls apart, in which
Mm-hmm.
case I just have to leave and remove myself from a
Mm-hmm.
situation, usually for only a few moments or a minute or two. And in that time and space, I still have to keep my awareness on, is my family safe?
Mm-hmm.
Because even if I am falling apart, I still am committed to keeping my family safe. I
Mm-hmm.
have to keep that awareness. And if I step away, then I have to come back to my breath, my feet on the ground, my center column, my heart rate. Where do I feel my energy in my body, right? Is it in my fingers, face, hands, neck, and chest, which is a signature of dysregulation for me? Can I start bringing that down lower to the ground, along with my breath and feeling my feet on the ground? And lastly, can I access conscious awareness to resources and tools that I have developed, right? Because if I'm totally dysregulated, it's just static white and red hot noise,
I actually love that visual. Yeah.
And
Mm-hmm.
so as those resources and tools start coming back online, that's also a telltale signature to me that like I'm getting regulated enough to go back to be with my family, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so there's these somatic and conscious awareness signatures that I now am aware of that like start telling me if where I'm at on the spectrum of fully regulated to dysregulated. And so every moment, every situation's different, depending on if I feel like I can go walk around the block and my family's fine with me leaving, or if I just need to literally go into the other room for 5 seconds so I can get from here to here and then go back and be with my family, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes that's all I can do.
Mm-hmm.
you know
Mm-hmm. I love
or even step a foot away from my child so that I can't actually physically put hands on them.
mm-hmm. Yeah, that bubble is when I hear that, like I'm like the energy bubble. It's just like let my energy bubble back up just a little bit, and like,
Yeah.
how does that feel? So you had mentioned like the energy up here just to get to here. It's like this is like where I can have baseline safety. Up here is too much. Down here, like okay, we can do it.
Yeah.
It brought Alika to mind. He has his red light, yellow light, green light. It's
Right.
like green light, everything is good. Yellow light, things are going towards not good. And it's like being
Right.
able to modulate those states. Okay, so everything that you just described, very human experience to me. Also, the way that I'm hearing you is a mature human experience.
Mm.
I'm really curious to hear from you, like, so this is kind of like a current mature experience. Like, what are some of the things that have led over time to you having this level of awareness and practice? Just a few standout moments that really like have shown you. Let me back up even a little bit further and zoom out. So my perception is that we all have a monster that lives inside of us, and I like my monster. My monster is like actually super dope and powerful and like very capable of creating safety in certain ways for my family. And when it comes out with when that energy comes up in certain context, it's not safe.
Mm.
Right? It's like my monster, if there is someone coming towards my family, like with physical or emotional or mental violence, like that monster gets to come out, create the barrier. Nope, stay back. When my child is having a hard time and that monster tries to come up,
Mm.
like that's not the place.
Right.
Right. So how have you cultivated a relationship with that energy that I would call the monster, so that you can have that mature expression that you're sharing with us here? What have been some of the experiences that you've had?
I think a big part of the process, which I imagine many men, or at least some men, might resonate with, is the process of realizing that they have a monster, trying with all of their might to get rid of the monster, or shoving it into a deep, dark basement and chaining it up, only to realize that when that monster gets free, he's going to be pissed off, hungry, vicious, uh, and a
Mhm.
lot more dangerous than if you keep the monster near you and create a relationship with the monster.
Mhm.
And so the process, I would say, started, I would say, not long before we first met.
Mhm.
I know in that book that Mitch Hash gave us, I'm totally blanking on the name of the
The
book.
Iron John, that book?
Iron John.
Yeah.
Yeah. Near the end of the book, he talks about these colored kind of phases that men go through. And I believe he describes them as red, white, and then black, although I could be getting the order wrong. But the white phase is when you realize, like, oh my gosh, I have these monsters and I'm just going to go love and light and try to run away from as fast as these monsters. You know, everything is love and light and I'm just going to be a good boy, you know.
Mhm.
I'm just going to go, I'm just going to follow up. I'm just going to do these like beautiful ceremonies and everything's going to be good because like love and light. And so I went through that phase, which is, you know, as I mentioned, the same phase of like trying to deny the monster, the warrior, the killer. Or I wouldn't say just the word, but that killer, which I is synonymous to me as the monster.
Mhm.
Only to realize like that doesn't work.
Mhm. Mhm.
One of two things or both are going to happen. Either you're going to eventually manifest disease because you are disconnecting and ostracizing a part of yourself for
Mhm.
so long that it turns into a very real disease.
How did that show up for you? Did you have a form of disease show up?
I would say, you know, early stages of disease, but more so for me, you know, the other thing I was getting to was like I mentioned earlier, that monster is occasionally going to break out of that dungeon and he's going to go on a rampage if you haven't created a relationship with him.
Mhm.
And so that's more so what was happening with me.
Got it.
Moments of rage and lashing out at people in my life in a very chaotic, uncontrolled way. And so once I started to realize what that actually was me suppressing and repressing the monster and the energy and the feelings that come with it, I started to create a relationship with the monster,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Can you take us into that like moment in time? Like what was the experience or experiences that gave you that lens of, oh, I actually need to create a relationship with this monster?
You know, a big one was I spent a period of time really lashing out at my parents and getting in these moments of these periods of time where I was completely entranced with rage and directing it at my parents in ways that they didn't deserve and that were not healthy or useful. It was useful for me learning about the monster, but the collateral damage was just not something that I would wish upon anyone, you know?
Mm.
And that pain and suffering that came with that period of my life of lashing out at my parents and relating to them from a place of rage really was the big moment. Well, is what like really kind of the magnitude of that is what like I just realized something has to change, right?
Mm-hmm.
The discomfort and the intensity of that. And you know, I'm grateful that I've been able to, with intention and practice, mend and find much more ease in my relationship with my parents, and that I didn't break it, right,
Mm.
permanently. And so I'm very grateful for the opportunity to emerge out of that a healthier, more aware and connected man in person, and to be able to use those experiences as healthy fuel for connecting with my monster and connecting with my parents in a different way.
Mm.
And so that was one of the biggest moments for me, or periods of time where I realized like, wow, I need to relate to myself in a different way.
Mm-hmm. Were there people who reflected this possibility to you and like showed you, like helped you to see that like there's a different way to do this in your life?
I would say inevitably yes. I haven't had too many single role models that I have been able to look to really learn and absorb healthy energies. And
Mm-hmm.
so I've really had to kind of piece together this from many different people in my life. And the more intention I put into it, that I'm going to call in men and people who have a healthy relationship with themselves for me to know what that feels like, to experience that,
Mm-hmm.
and to absorb or at least entrain to that energy so I know what it feels like.
Mm-hmm.
The more intentional I've been with that, the more people have come into my life that do embody that. There's no one really jumping out that's like I learned from this person.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just as I became more intentional that this is something that I wanted to shift and embody, the people I started to attract people into my life that, you know, mostly were just like either like right at the same step in their journey or one step ahead, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oftentimes we learn best from someone who's just one step ahead instead of
Mm-hmm.
someone who's like 20 steps ahead, because oftentimes we don't know like how do I get there. And there's times where being around someone who's deeply regulated and deeply in harmony with themselves like is incredibly healing and nourishing,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I would say a little bit of both.
Mm. And what you just said brought like a couple things up for me. So there's a particular podcast that I found a while back. I was looking for podcasts on like the sacred masculine. And like there's a lot out there on that particular term, but I was looking for something specific. And like I found this podcast where this man, I don't remember his name right now, who's someone who's obviously done a lot of work
Mhm.
and is very deeply regulated, and it's almost intolerable to listen to in certain contexts.
Right.
And so there's this, what I heard you say was that we need someone that we can actually relate to
Right.
and who can relate to us, where it's like we're at a similar enough place where we can, like, okay, the journey from here to here, like, so that tree that I'm trying to get to is like I can
Yeah.
see it here. It's not like in the forest that's 5 ridges over and I have like some big myth that it exists, but I haven't like gotten close enough to be able to pinpoint even a like proximal geolocation. And I also, one of the things that came up for me as I was listening is the importance of, so it's like, and this has been a through line of this conversation. So it's like, you're someone who has, with a great deal of intention, like created aims. Like, this is what I'm aiming towards right now. This is what I'm choosing to create. And then taking the time to actually self orient, like, what does it take inside of me to get to bring that into my life? And then noticing the people and other beings that show up that like hold that same, a similar frequency. And my experience of myself is that when I'm around other people who have at least similar questions about how we can do this differently, that I get a lot of insight from that, as much because my system can kind of roll. My system, not kind of, my system can relax.
Mm.
It's like, okay, like we're viewing this whole thing similarly enough that there's a communication that happens below the level of my conscious awareness, and definitely below the level of me being able to articulate it,
Mm.
that I can feel. It's that vibe. And when I have that vibe, like, the conversation opens up, the potentials open up. And I feel like I'm hearing that from you in your own way. I'm curious if that resonates.
Yes, it does. There's something that happens, I believe, when a resonance is created. And very often it's easiest to create resonance with someone who is exploring or in very similar energies as you, right? By definition, like, if we're looking at things from an energetic standpoint, like, resonance will happen easily when, you know, the waveforms are very close to each other, are very similar.
Mm-hmm.
And so when resonance is created, we create a field of information that is more expansive and holds more information than we had just by ourselves. With that, when that field is created, we start to, even if we can't immediately put our finger on it or articulate it, we start to feel the presence of answers to our questions or resources that maybe weren't there when we were just by ourselves. That's why, there's so many reasons why being isolated during the COVID time was so detrimental to us. But, there's something I think a real magic that happens when people gather. We create a field of information, potential, and possibility that I don't know if I can say for sure that it can't happen when we're not right in front of each other, but I know for sure that it's much more powerful from what I've experienced when we're right there in front of each other. Yeah. And especially if we can create resonance energetically with those people.
So, brought in a couple of things. I'm feeling like I want to segue into kind of like a whole different vein here. You're a coach, men's work facilitator, and are you still doing sound healing?
Mm-hmm.
I'm actually really curious, like, as someone who is a space holder across many different contexts, what is your experience of holding that resonant field for other people to interact with? And how have you developed that skill?
The short and sweet answer is attuning to a very clear intention, feeling what the energy of that intention is, and staying with and in the energy of that intention while I'm holding space for someone. I would say for me, that's the most important thing. We were talking about nervous systems earlier. I recently fell in love with the saying that a healed nervous system heals nervous system.
Mm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so, always doing the work to make sure that my nervous system is regulated and healed. Because even if I just sit there, roll dice around in my hand or just shake around, I'm just saying, even if I don't take any physical action that does anything, if I'm holding a clear intention for someone and I am staying regulated, I am creating the energy and the space for the healing, the growth, or the transformation to happen, right? And nervous systems learn from other nervous systems energetically. It's not from talking, it's not from reading a book. Yes, we can do practices, somatic practices and energetic practices to facilitate that. But at the end of the day, a nervous system needs to experience another nervous system to learn or relearn, remember what it feels like to be healed and regulated.
So how have you see what I hear you doing is like kind of bringing in like the what you do, right?
Yeah.
So you're setting your intention, you're like tending your nervous system
Right.
so that the people that you're interacting with as a space holder can feel what a regulated nervous system feels like at a sub and unconscious level, as well as
Right.
what they're aware of.
Mm-hmm.
And that is actually like one of the primary things
Mm-hmm.
that you're doing as a space holder, which
Mm-hmm.
love it.
Right.
Like very much in agreement and alignment on that. How have you developed that skill?
One key piece has been intentionally spending time with healed and regulated nervous systems and people who are very intentional. It's funny because I've reflected a lot. I know the term trauma informed practitioner is like a big thing in the facilitation and space holding kind of world. And I 100% agree that if you are holding space for someone in a healing and even a growth and transformation context, that understanding trauma is critical. But
Mm-hmm.
I also notice how many people they don't understand what is actually most important in that. And like so many, I've observed so many people say you need to be a trained trauma informed practitioner. And I'm like, well, when I reflect back, I don't think any of the people that held the best space for me to heal, grow, and transform had a certification saying that they were a trauma informed practitioner. Right.
Mm.
And so what I'm getting at is I have just intentionally sought out people that have a certain level of mastery over holding that intention and maintaining that regulated, safe energy.
One of the things that I heard, my interpretation of what you said, it's like you can't intellectually fake this stuff.
Right.
It's like I can't read a book and like know what it feels like to have a nervous system that's
Right.
settled and safe. And I can practice it on my own, but I can only go so far on my own.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually need other people who have done work on their nervous systems and their awareness of what's happening internally and the impact of that externally to be able to feel that resonance so that my body, my physiology can actually learn through connection. Because at the heart of it, I perceive that to be like how we learn at the most root level. So you work with people at the level of their bodies, along with their minds, along with some other pieces of self. I'm imagining. I don't know how you'd articulate that. I won't put words in your mouth. I'm curious, like, so you're doing personal training, you're doing sound healing, you're doing coaching. Like, what is the through line to that work for you as you're going into all of this? Like, what is it for Bryan that you are like offering to the world through these things in your own words?
Well, the biggest through line is understanding what my gifts, tools, and offerings are,
Mm-hmm.
and then being able to attune to the person or people that are in front of me in real time and understand and hear from them what they need and what they want. Really, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes that is a non-verbal sensing of what it is they really need or want and sometimes it emerges through conversation as well. And so in everything I do, ultimately I'm devoted to being a guide as well as someone who offers tools and resources to help empower people to move towards what they want and need.
How have you personally uncovered your gifts?
I mean, to go back to the intuition thing, the main thing has just been following what's alive, following those yeses. The unwavering calling for me has been being a guide and resource to people. And each step along the way, there have been new paths that have emerged that, like, as I'm walking by them, that intuitive hit of like, turn to the path. That's the right answer, right? And so the most bizarre one was with the sound healing because I had one of the strongest intuitive hits of my life without any context at all. Meaning, I just had that feeling like something that would really serve you to do is coming, but I don't know what it is yet. I didn't even know what it was until like 3 months after I had that overwhelming feeling like, get ready, like, here's something new. And then once I realized it was sound healing, I was like, I don't know almost anything about sound healing. This is weird. Very often, I'd imagine you have observed that many people are exposed to a modality, a practice, a tool, or resource that helps them, and they realize, like, whoa, I want to explore this more. And then, maybe they become a practitioner or someone who offers that thing, right? And that's
Mm-hmm.
often the path that takes someone there. With this, it was completely spontaneous, at least what it logically seemed like. But it was undeniable. The way that I felt, like the truth that I felt, I just did it. I just started doing it. And each step along the way, every new commitment that I made, every time I took a step forward, something showed up for me to follow, for me to learn, for me to practice and to integrate. It's really just been an intuitive journey of following what's alive, my passions, as well as occasionally making wrong turns and feeling the dissonance and even suffering that came about as I went down the wrong path, which we maybe don't even need to call it the wrong path. It was a path of learning, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So there's a component of it feels like it's related to a lot of what you've shared, which I'm just going to call the skill of saying no. And my own experience, if I'm going to follow the breadcrumbs, if you will, find alignment and like stay with that alignment, I have to learn how to say no to the right things. Is that an experience that you've had? And if so, like, how have you developed that skill in saying no to the right things?
Well, I'm probably going to sound like a broken record here, but it's true that it's just a felt sense that you learn to listen to,
Mm-hmm.
right?
What is your felt sense when it's a no?
I mean, to go back to that analogy of, like, if I'm looking at a multiple choice question on a test, like when I clearly know that an answer is a no. Like I can feel it. Like don't mark that one. That's not the right answer. Yeah, there's a sense of dissonance. I don't know if you've dabbled in music at all.
I enjoy music.
Well, have you ever uh, heard an instrument that's out of tune and you feel it in your body? Like,
Sure,
oh.
sure, sure.
Sometimes it's like that.
Hmm.
And it doesn't have to precipitate into logic, right? A logical reason. I went to a networking group a little less than a year ago. Yeah, definitely less than a year ago. And there were many things that logically felt in alignment with like interacting with and moving forward with this networking group and how it might be able to serve me. But there was just that like, oh, like the instrument isn't, it's not tuned. Like I just feel that dissonance in my body and being, and I had to listen to that. And it was tough because like I had to disappoint people, right? But I couldn't deny that there wasn't resonance there. There was dissonance
Hmm.
energetically. Sometimes that has to be retrospective, especially with the practice that I illuminated earlier, which is like attune, define my aligned action, follow through with the aligned action.
Hmm.
Sometimes I just walked through and past the dissonance and I take note and I am like, all right, once I get to that tree, I'm gonna reflect and look back. Like, was there collateral damage? Is that dissonance still there? I've got to take inventory, but ultimately it's always a feeling.
And have you always had access to that feeling and like the ability to follow it, or is that something that you've had to develop?
For sure I had to develop it. I'd imagine it's always been there. I would say I've probably subconsciously followed that many of times without it registering as like this is my intuition saying no.
Hmm.
I've honed the yes, the connection to the yes part of my intuition for many years, but it's just been recently that I've really intentionally started listening to, proactively listening to the no. I think I've had a tendency to be a yes man, a yes person to the point of it being unhealthy, right? Or not serving me. With so many things showing up in my life that I am a clear 100% yes to, I've had to learn to say no more, or else I notice that I'm not actually 100% yes to the things that I said I'm 100% yes to.
Hmm. Right, like that scattering of energy that like
Mm-hmm.
you no longer have the energy that you need to be able to keep going in the direction that you are committed to and choosing. Man, so feels like we kind of circled from intuition and creation and inventorship all the way around and kind of like landing back at that as like having a clearly defined directionality that you're choosing, checking in with it, really honing in that yes, and then over time developing the skill of like anything that's not like a fully aligned yes, we're gonna let those things go and like move through the hard feelings of disappointment of others and like not being able to do everything because the yes man is the drained man and the drained man is not a safe man.
Mm. Oh,
So Bryan, as we're moving towards a close for today, I'm curious if there's anything else alive for you right now that you'd like to share. If so, please do. And also, like, where can people find you? How would you like to be found? What are the forms of finding Bryan in this day and age?
well, my intention is for my website to be the best place very soon.
Hmm.
I just switched to a new platform, and so my website is in complete disarray at this moment. And so I'm hoping by the time that people hear this, it'll at least be in enough harmony for me to send people there. So my website is thebridgevibe.com. Thebridgevibe.com. That's for sure going to be the best place to connect with me. And I intend on all of my offerings to be there. As of now, it's mainly a landing place and an information location for my transformational sound work, and my coaching. I'm checking in right now to see if Instagram is in alignment with me to put some energy into. I know some people who are in integrity that do put out regular content on Instagram. So feel free to check me out on Instagram. I am the Sound Bridge. What is most alive to share right now is I have recently dove headfirst into this transformational sound therapy, and it's straight magic right now. And what it's showing to me is like we are really possible and capable of so much more than we're taught by the world, or at least the collective cultural kind of consciousness as it is now. And I really think the gateway to that, to unlocking our superpowers and our gifts, is really diving deeper into the body, healing the nervous system, bringing the senses fully alive, and staying in that sensory, physical, energetic experience more often and more deeply. What I'm learning is like we have all the tools we need to heal ourselves and each other by just sensing more deeply and exploring our bodies more deeply.
Just taking a moment to let that sink in. Love it. Love it. And so you're using sound and space holding to support people in finding more and more access to their body and to freeing up whatever energy is stuck and moving what needs to be moved so that people can access more of their potential. Is that kind of the gist of it?
I would say I'm using sound and vibrational tools along with my own sensing to help clear static, dissonance, and incoherence in people's energy so that they can return to their natural state of coherence and harmony and move forward from that place.
Beautiful. Okay. So thebridgevibe.com. Any other closing words?
I'm just super appreciative, brother.
Yeah, same, man.
Super appreciative of this opportunity, this moment to reflect out loud and to put our frequencies and vibrations out into the world to see what happens. And even if we just had this conversation in a deep connected way, like I'm grateful for that.
Yeah, man.
And so thank you. I love being able to look back and see the path that has unfolded since we first met and all the things that have happened. And
it's been a wild ride, man.
It's been wild.
Yeah, just to reciprocate and reflect. I really appreciate the level of your process that you're aware of and able to articulate, and your willingness to share it. I find so much value in getting to receive somebody else's like mapped terrain as an overview. Like from my perspective, it's through witnessing other people's maps of their own experience that I'm able to more clearly see my own. And I perceive that to be true for a lot of us. So a lot of gratitude for you coming on and sharing. And I trust that this will get out to some people to spread the vibes, man.
Thank you.
If you're curious about our 9-month Initiate program, check out the link in the description.
When you're ready to begin your journey, visit elementalmovement.life. We'll see you there.